TheProdBox brings experiences from myself, industry professionals, colleagues, senior leaders, and discussions on key topics within the product management and technology space from a player and coaching point of view, aiming to help us all learn and succeed in building great product management teams, resulting in great software products. So welcome and enjoy. Don't forget to subscribe or join our mailing list at theprodbox.co.uk. Episode 8 of The ProdBox. Today we are going to talk about imposter syndrome. Now I know imposter syndrome is not directly related to product management, but it can rear its ugly head, especially when embarking on a new product management role or joining a very different company, taking on a very different product or team, or taking on a leadership role. It can come up and you can experience feelings of imposter syndrome. And today I am joined by Ramat Tejani, Chief Encouragement Officer at the Inspiration Box and Program Lead and Personal Development Lead at the Black Employee Network at AWS, Amazon Web Services, of course. And we are going to explore imposter syndrome and some ways to deal with and actually embrace those feelings and turn them positive. Welcome, Ramat, to the ProdBox. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, Lucinda. Thanks for having me.
Hello. And first, tell us a bit about what a Chief Encouragement Officer does and a little bit about the Inspiration Box.
Thanks, Lucinda, for having me. So, a Chief Encouragement Officer, basically, as you mentioned, I wear a lot of different hats, and I think when it comes down to my core values and the things that I'm passionate about doing, it's about helping others to recognize that they have something more to offer and to showcase that they have stories worth telling, whether that is individuals or businesses. And so my role is to encourage people to share those stories and to tell those stories and to really figure out what those stories are. So the Inspiration Box, it's essentially an intentional personal development space. And we have 3 different pillars. And the idea is that we support you to discover your true self, to embrace your true self, and to nurture your true self. So that's the Inspiration Box in a nutshell. And that's a Chief Encouragement Officer in a nutshell. I'm basically your pocket cheerleader. Tell me you can't do it and I'll show you that you can.
I love that. Everybody needs a cheerleader. I definitely need a cheerleader. I try to be my own cheerleader, but sometimes, she just won't get out of my pocket and cheer for me. So it's great to have a Chief Encouragement Officer to give us some tips on how to deal with imposter syndrome. So I wanted to start with a stat, actually. So according to the Behavioral Science Review, over 70% of people experience imposter syndrome in their professional lifetime. And I'm sure that includes a fair few of product management professionals, because product management is so vast and it varies from business to business, from product to product. So it's clear to see why you might experience those feelings.
Yeah.
And I often say on the ProdBox, there's no one size fits all to product management. So starting a new role can be daunting because it's likely to be very different from your previous role, or you might be stepping up into a leadership role, as I mentioned. What are your thoughts on this percentage? Because it's quite a lot, actually.
Well, I guess if it's a stat by, such a well-known publication, there must be some truth behind it. But I would say that it's probably higher than that in the real world. I know 70% is quite a lot, but I think everyone experiences imposter syndrome in one shape, form or another. It's highly unlikely that an individual has never doubted themselves or never thought or had never had second thoughts about whether or not they are the right person for a role, the right person for a project. It's just about everyone having different tools available to them, ready to then say, okay, even though I hear this voice, doesn't matter, I can still do this. Or, forget that, or put that part of that voice to the side, and let's still work on that challenge. So I'm surprised that it's 70%. I would have thought it would be much higher. I thought it'd be closer to 100. Like, everyone has that voice.
I think you're right. I think everybody has experienced those feelings. I mean, I certainly have in my professional lifetime, and sometimes you think, actually, what the hell am I doing? Oh, crap, I can't do this role, or oh, I'm in the deep end here. How do I survive? And you just sort of do it, and maybe it's harder for others and easier for some to overcome those feelings. But imposter syndrome essentially is anxiety, fear, and fear of failure. And I can't believe that. I can't not believe that 100% of people have not experienced a fear of failure. Like the example that you gave before, obviously we came on and started recording with Obama.
Listen, if the president of the free world even experiences, and I know he's not the current president. I know we have Joe Biden in the office now, but Obama will always be my president. So, or our president, even though he's in the US, we're in the UK.
Even though we're in the UK, but we can have a president too. We can have a president too.
We'll keep him on board. We'll keep him on board, and he's expressed in his books that he's experienced like that whole idea of imposter syndrome, or thinking, I don't know if I'm quite ready for this, or I don't know if this is quite the right option or right thing to do, but yet he still did it, or he still persevered, and that paid off in dividends. So I think, if the president of the free world has imposter syndrome, best believe everyone else has some form of imposter syndrome in all that they do. It's just some people have learned to deal with it better. Some people have the right tools in place to deal with it, and some people actually now recognize what it is. A lot of people don't really understand what imposter syndrome is, and I think that's where there's that fear that, oh my gosh, like, this voice is telling me ABC, it must be true, I must just have to listen to it. No ma'am, no sir, there's things that you can do about that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when thinking about imposter syndrome and looking deeper into it in preparation for this episode, there are many different types of imposter syndrome. So I think there are 5, if I name them. So perfectionists, so they set extremely high expectations for themselves, even if they meet 99% of their goals.
Yeah.
They're going to feel like failures, and any small mistake will make them question their own competence.
Yeah.
To all the perfectionists out there, 99% is fantastic.
It's an A star. What do you mean? It's amazing. I say to people all the time, like, when it comes to those perfectionists, they just don't realize it, that they are looking at the 1% that no one else sees. That bit that, the corner of the paper might be turned, and like no one else even looking at the corner. Everyone's looking at the fact that it's just a great document. So it's that 99% is more than amazing. It's an A star. Come on.
Absolutely, absolutely. And think about that 1 little percent. It might just be a full stop in an essay. You never know. There's another type of imposter syndrome, experts, and I think I fall under this category, actually. So experts, they feel the need to know every piece of information before they start a project, and constantly look for new certifications and trainings to improve their skills. They won't apply for a job if they don't meet all the criteria in a posting, and they might be hesitant to ask a question or speak up in a meeting because they're afraid of looking stupid if they don't already know the answer. And it's a oh my god, when you doubt yourself, then you doubt your competence, when actually you are very much competent to be where you are. So you should definitely use your voice and speak up. I think the point about not applying for a job if you don't meet all the criteria, I don't know where I saw this, but it was out there in the ether somewhere, that women actually are less likely to apply for a job if they don't tick every box.
Yeah, so one of the many hats that I've worn in the past, I used to be a careers coach, and so and I still do it a little bit in part of the coaching that I do with people. But it comes to the simple fact that women generally will look at a job description and want to hit 100% in the job description, or at least close to 90% before they'll apply, where men tend to look at the job description and can see that they fit about 50 to 60% of it and they're good to go. And they're like, yep, cool. You're asking for, 4 languages, I speak 2, I'm good to go. So it's really interesting that we have that disparity again, I guess, when it comes to applying for roles. But what I always tell my clients is that I've sat on the other side of writing job descriptions and actually interviewing for roles, as well as obviously being an interviewee and being interviewed for jobs. And I can assure you that when job descriptions are being written, they are being written for the A star. They're like, if I could get everything in the box and have absolutely like the top notch candidate, this is what I would want. But when it comes to the actual interview, I need to know that there's room for growth in whoever it is that I'm going to employ for this role. If someone comes in and can definitely do absolutely everything and can't demonstrate where they might be able to grow in this role, it's going to be a problem for me, because it means that there's a stronger likelihood that they'll move on within 3 to 6 months. That's not what I need. So I'm not saying, look at a job and tick one of the basic requirements and then say, go, you're going to apply for it. Do take a look and get a gut feel if you could do this job, if you genuinely think you could actually argue your case, and then go for it. Where you don't meet the requirements, think about what you can do to improve yourself, or how you can use that as an example of what you are willing to learn within the role. That's how you get over it.
Yeah, definitely. And I can, as a hiring manager myself, I can testify to that, because you always put everything in the job description. You want A to Z skills, but you have to leave room for growth. Growth is really important. And especially when you're entering into a new role, even as a product manager, and maybe it might be a B2C and you previously worked for a B2B, you have to understand that you will need to learn, and learning is part of a role. If you enter a role and you're not going to learn anything, or it's not challenging, it's going to exhaust you.
Yeah.
And, I would definitely encourage you to apply for roles, if we're talking about product management roles here, that you don't quite hit 100% of the job description, because guaranteed you have the skills to do the job. You might not have the skills at that particular time, but you are capable of acquiring those skills.
You have the foundation.
The job, exactly. If you're confident enough to be a grad, for example, and apply for that CTO role or chief product officer role, you go you, but just try and be realistic about where your skills fit in and how you can work towards, being a perfectionist in that role. So let's talk about the natural genius. Someone who struggles or works hard to accomplish something, feels that they are not good enough because they've had to work so hard to accomplish that thing. So they are used to skills coming easily, and when they have to put effort in, the brain tells them that's proof that you're an imposter, because you have to work so hard at this thing. Why is it not coming easy?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard if naturally things come really easily to you because you're in your zone of genius. But the reality is, in the world of product management, but also, just the world of work generally, innovation is important. And the fact that you need to learn new things and look at things outside of your actual remit means that you will be forced to explore ideas and thoughts that you have no clue about, and you're always going to be learning. And I always education is something that no one can take away from you. It's one of the reasons that I do the roles that I do. I think when you take your personal development seriously, it's something that no one can take. They might be able to take your car, your house, whatever, the clothes off your back if need be, but they can't take away the education piece. And so even if you are a genius at one particular thing, it's okay to be a learner again, and it's okay to want to explore that. I say to people all the time, take life whether that's personal or work, as a bit of an experiment. Be a bit like a scientist and know that it's okay to fail. So if you fail, you haven't, got it wrong and that's the end of it. Actually, you've proven another way not to do something. So now you can find more ways to do something. So yeah.
Definitely, I agree. And if we use that analogy and just apply it to how product managers approach building new products, we have this kind of fail fast way of thinking. We try something, it doesn't work, we try another way. If you're designing something, then you might implement design sprints, Google design sprints, for example. You might do innovation sessions. You have different ways of getting to the end goal. So there isn't just one way of doing things. So you can also apply the same logic you would when you're building a product or exploring something new or exploring a hypothesis to test assumptions on a product or feature or something. Apply that to how you would approach a product management role, for example, or step up to a leadership role. Try things. If they don't work, try something else. But just always have the confidence to keep on going and keep on trying.
No, I agree.
So soloists, so there's two more types of imposters, soloists and supermen or superwomen. So soloists, they feel they have to accomplish tasks on their own. And if they need to ask for help, then that means they're a failure or a fraud. This cannot, in product management, it's a team effort. Team collaboration is key. Asking questions is one of the most important skills in a product management role, in a product role, period. So, we have to ask questions, and don't be scared to ask questions.
When it comes to the soloists, I think there's a lot of pressure sometimes to hold all the baggage yourself and to think that, if you ask for help, then you may be judged. But actually, we have to remember that, especially in the world of tech, like we're both in the world of tech, and it's not a solo journey. Like the success of a product, of a program, of anything depends on the team, and it also depends on diverse perspectives being brought into the room.
Absolutely.
So if you're working on something and it's just you have your own unconscious biases that you may or may not be aware of, but that definitely exists. That means that you have a very narrow focal point when it comes to what you want to do and where you want to go. By bringing other people in and other experiences in, you get a more rounded view of the world. And that's what you need in order to succeed when it comes to products and when it comes to programs. So I would say to the soloist, it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to position it as, just looking for feedback or just looking for insights, if you don't want to position it as looking for help.
Absolutely. The whole team aspect in a technology environment is so important. And when you touched on bias and diversity when building products, they come out in the product. So if you don't have diverse teams, if you don't have different perspectives, if you don't have different experiences coming together to build something, those biases you're implementing into the product. And, I did an episode on bias and diversity in technology. And there are so many examples out there, like soap dispensers that don't activate for darker skin, or photo apps that don't recognize darker skin. Women, for example, it's there's so many examples out there because that diversity isn't there when you're building the product. So think about it for yourself. You need to constantly get feedback to help to improve what you're doing and just help to strengthen your skills as well.
Exactly.
The last one is Superman or Superwoman that push themselves to work harder than those around them to prove that they're not imposters. So they feel they need to succeed in all aspects of life.
Yeah.
And they feel stressed when they don't accomplish something.
So this one is
we all feel
difficult
when we don't accomplish something.
And I think the challenge with this one is that I think that there are some nuances that come with it that come from societal expectations and also cultural expectations. So, it's a known fact that Black women are expected to just get on with things and do more and to be able to withstand things more. And that's not just within, the working world. It translates also into like health, for example. So when it comes to Black women getting pain medication when they are pregnant or when they are about to give birth, or just generally, doctors are more likely to say, are you really in pain, when a Black woman says that she is in pain, as opposed to a woman of any other color. And so it comes down to some of the societal and cultural nuances and biases that exist. So I think it's not only that, but I think that plays a really big part in it. And when it comes to wanting to be a Superman or Superwoman, people want to prove to those around them that they are capable, that they have been given the role for the right reason, and that they can do the job. And, they don't need help doing the job or getting stuff done. And I think it's about recognizing that we're not Superman, we're not Clark Kent, and we're not whatever the name of the female version of
I don't know. I can't tell you that, but I'll
Google it and add it to the show notes.
Google it and add it. Yeah, I'll add it to the notes.
But yeah, we're not those superheroes that we see in the movies or in the films. Like, that's not our reality. The reality is that we are human, and so there will be times where we can carry weight, but there will also be times where we really cannot, and we need to then seek that additional support from various stakeholders, internally or externally.
Definitely. And I think, feeling stressed if you don't accomplish something, we will naturally feel, but I think you hit the nail on the head, and it goes back to us as women or Black women being more likely to experience imposter syndrome if we don't see examples of people who look like us or share our background, who are clearly succeeding in our field. So if you don't see someone like you at the top, and you don't see someone, where you want to be or where you aspire to be, you then start to feel like, well, maybe actually I can't get there. Well, nobody else is there. Who's there? If you look at the number of Black female CEOs in the UK.
Where? I don't see where. What Black female CEO UK?
Yeah.
No. Right?
Exactly. So it brings it back to having examples to follow. And there's loads of, if you look even in technology, most of the leadership in tech are white males. So if you're entering into Amazon, for example, as a young grad, and you see Jeff Bezos and he looks like you, and you identify with his background, and you're then fired up because you can make it there. But if you don't see someone like you there, it's you have to kind of build that narrative yourself and try and follow the path, but it's kind of hazy at the top to where you're going.
Yeah, so I think
it bring about that stress.
You're right, and there's that whole idea that you can't be what you can't see, and I think for a lot of people within the tech industry that are part of a minority, whatever minority that might be, whether that's being female, whether that's being a person of color, whether that's being a person that has a particular sexuality, whatever it might be, if you're in a minority, it can feel as though you don't have someone to look up to kind of look at a path that you might want to follow. And I often say, like, I'm often the only Black person in the rooms that I'm in, both at work or outside work, and I'm often the only Black person. And for me, I think that's why I do a lot of the work that I do, because it's important for us to share our stories and to tell our stories so that others can recognize that, okay, that it is possible to make strides in certain industries, you may have to be the first, and so you may have to carve your own path, but that doesn't make it
Yeah.
impossible at all. It's about almost advocating for yourself and finding others that will advocate for you to help you along the journey, and also just having the right tools in your bag to know how to make those movements and how to take those steps forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody knows that I love a quote on the ProdBox. And here we go with another quote that I'm going to share. During the research, there's a psychotherapist and he's an executive coach in New York. His name's Brian Daniel Norton. And he said, when you experience systemic oppression or are directly or indirectly told your whole life that you are less than or undeserving of success, and you begin to achieve things in a way that goes against a long-standing narrative in the mind, imposter syndrome will occur. And corporate culture exacerbates the problem of imposter syndrome, particularly for women.
Mm.
And I think that just kind of sums up what we were kind of just saying. I thought I quite liked how succinct that was.
Yeah.
He also went on to say the lack of role models for marginalized communities has a major impact on making people feel like they do or don't belong in these corporate environments. And as you said, you're often in meetings as the only woman of color, the only Black woman in the room. And yeah, that's been my experience.
It's interesting because whilst I definitely notice it, I also um, I also have to remember that there's a reason I'm in the room. So if I'm in that room, it's
Exactly.
because I deserve to be there, without a shadow of a doubt. And so whether others notice it or not, there's not much I can do about it at that moment in time. But what I can do is ensure that I work on different things to help get other people that look like me into the spaces that I'm in,
Absolutely.
so that there are more people that look like me, and they can share their experiences and they can give their perspectives. And I look at it like I sit in those rooms very proudly to be able to bring my experience and say, actually, have you considered this perspective? Because my experience tells me
Yeah.
ABC, and it's a perspective that someone just may not have thought of purely because they haven't walked in those shoes, and that's absolutely fine. I have walked in
Yeah.
those shoes, and so I can share that perspective. So yeah, it's a real thing, and I think for the majorities in a room, they have to take the time to sit back and say, whose voice are we not hearing, or not, whose opinion are we not hearing or seeing when we have these conversations, so that we can end up with product and services that actually work for our target audience and our target customer, who is a lot more diverse.
Yeah. Yeah. And the product's inclusive.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk about dealing with imposter syndrome. So
Mm,
overcoming those feelings and acknowledging those thoughts, putting them into perspective.
yeah.
As our chief encouragement officer, how can we go about, dealing with these feelings of imposter syndrome?
So I think there's a couple of things, and there's no way we could go through all of it in this episode. But I
Yeah.
I encourage people to remember that usually that voice that we hear internally telling us that we can't, or that we shouldn't, or maybe we should try something else, is usually our what people call is their inner critic. And the role of that inner critic is to protect us. It's to protect us from the unknown. So it's not a bad voice. Like, it's not because, you've got someone in your head that doesn't like you. That's not it at all. In fact, it's a complete opposite. They really, like, your inner critic is designed to protect you. And in not being able to protect you by physically making you do or not do something, it will plant these seeds which kind of get you to really think about whether or not the action you're about to take is the right action for you. So it plants these seeds of like the future, which let's remember, hasn't happened yet, but thinking about what the future might look like if you take it and giving you a negative outcome. So I think what I love people to do when they think about their inner critic is to remember, first of all, that your inner critic isn't necessarily against you, it's there to protect you. And that, I guess, firstly helps people frame the idea that, okay, this person doesn't hate me. This person might, like, I don't hate myself here. I'm trying to protect myself. So what can I do to kind of like to work with that? And I hear a lot of people talking about silencing your inner critic. I don't have time for you to silence anything, people. Like, let's not do that. I think,
Listen.
yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge that the inner critic exists. But what I do want you to do is to find ways to quieten your inner critic and say, all right, maybe not today. So there's a book by a lady called Tara Moore called Playing Big. And in that book, she talks about, actually naming your inner critic. So, I had to do a massive presentation to some senior leaders recently, and my inner critic came up, and I decided to name her. What did I name her that day? I can't even remember. But let's say I named her Jane for the sake of the name. And that morning when I had to do my presentation, Jane showed up and was like, I don't know that you're ready for this. I was just like, Jane, today we're gonna be ready. It's gonna be fine. Let's do this. Let's prove you wrong, Jane. And by naming it and actually speaking to it as though it's another person, it almost helps to make it smaller. So that would be my number one, or my number two thing. After recognizing it's a real thing, number two would be to name your inner critic. And then the third thing that I'd ask you to do is to think about your inner mentor. And I work with my clients in creating a vision of what your future self would tell you. So if you think about yourself maybe 15, 20 years from now, what would that version of yourself tell you about the situation you're worried about? Would they tell you to keep worrying? Would they tell you to buck up and keep going? Would they tell you that actually this isn't a battle worth fighting? So yeah, maybe we leave this for another day. Whatever it might be, what advice would you give to your future? What advice would your future self give to you? And think about it that way. So those are, I guess, three things that your audience can maybe look at exploring when it comes to that imposter syndrome piece. It's really important that we are kinder to ourselves and we recognize that we're not bad people for thinking we can't do things. It's not that at all. It's about, and we need to build that toolkit, as I said, that can ensure that you'll be okay no matter what.
Definitely. And I think just to add to that, it's all about remembering that the more you practice a skill, the better you get at it. So
Exercise that
you might
muscle.
be low in confidence, exercise the confidence muscle.
Mm-hmm.
The more you do it, the more confident you'll get at you'll be doing it, and you'll blink and the critic won't even come up. That Jane has gone on holiday.
Yeah, exactly.
She won't come up and say, hey, you can't do that presentation to the senior leaders, because you've done it, you've practiced, you've gained your confidence, and you've dealt with it and you've become stronger. But I think it's also really important to try and recognize or have a deeper understanding of your strengths and weaknesses, because if you have to focus on your strengths and use your strengths to address weaknesses that might be causing those feelings of imposter syndrome as well.
It's funny you talk about strengths, actually, because I did my 360 at work today with my manager, and we were talking about the importance of really leaning into your strengths, because I think there's so much around recognizing what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and then how can you fix your weaknesses. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't fix your weaknesses, but what I am saying is that if you focus on your strengths, I can assure you that they will help you to then indirectly work on your weaknesses. And so what is it that you are good at? What is it that other people think you're good at? And I'm actually in the middle of developing a course actually around really recognizing what your strengths are and what your superpowers are, because I don't think enough people really dive deep into one, what your values are, so what's really important to you at your core, but then two, what your strengths are. Like, what are you really good at? What does everyone come to you for? What are you known for? And how can you really use those to then figure out what you want to do, what your big vision is, and setting up goals to actually get you there. So I'm working on a course at the moment, which I should have ready in summer, to help people go through that. But strengths is such an important thing that people forget about all the time. And I'd say lean into your strengths more than even working on your weaknesses. I'm not saying forget your weaknesses, but your strengths have gotten you to places and can get you even further.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that your strengths are your superpower.
Yeah.
That is your that's where you get your power from to kind of not address your weaknesses, improve on your weaknesses. You get it from strength, from your strengths,
Yeah.
essentially. And, when you mention setting goals, I think you also have to, you have to set those goals, and they have to be realistic, and they have to challenge you, but they also have to be realistic and achievable, because that can further feelings of imposter syndrome if you're setting goals for yourself that are just way out of this world. Just as we would do discovery and iterate product development and improve on our product, you set achievable goals and do the same for yourself. Set achievable goals for yourself to grow and progress and, learn new skills as well. Don't try and put too much on yourself, because you might end up feeling even worse if you're not achieving them.
Yeah, I think it's about recognizing that we all need to stretch a little bit. And so when it comes to your goals, I think, yes, they should be achievable, but they should make you a tiny bit uncomfortable, a tiny bit like, oh, could I do that? Yeah. Oh, I don't know. Just a little bit, because that stretch then forces you to build and work that muscle, like you mentioned, and build that muscle over and over again, because you're stepping a little bit outside your comfort zone. If you stay in your comfort zone, I can assure you nothing grows in a comfort zone. Like, you get bored, you get complacent, and it's not necessary for you to do that, and you want to grow. And like you said, whether it's moving into working on a new product, whether it's going into leadership, whether it's moving from B2B to B2C, whatever it might be, you need to have those goals which are just that little bit more, that allow you to stretch yourself a little bit. But as Lucinda said, they also need to be like achievable to some degree. You can't set a goal that there's absolutely no way you can achieve. If that's what the goals you're setting, then you're not setting goals correctly, and you're not setting the right sort of goals.
Absolutely. It needs to challenge you to move out of your comfort zone, but not frighten you to stay in it. There you go. I've created a quote there. So, Lucinda from the Podbox. Ramat, it's been a fantastic discussion. Do you have any final thoughts, any key takeaways for our audience before we close?
Yeah, I think I'd just say to the audience that remember that everyone has experienced or continues to experience some form of imposter syndrome. It's not just the high achievers. It's not just, those that want to achieve the best or be the best at work or whatever it is. It's not just the soloists. As Lucinda mentioned, there's so many different versions of imposter syndrome. So look at what version you think resonates most with you, and look at how you can tackle that. I'd also just encourage everyone to show themselves some self-compassion. Don't be so hard on yourself. Your inner critic is going to show up, and it can be a loud inner critic, So use your inner mentor, so your future self, to almost chat to your inner critic and say, listen, this is how we're going to attack it this time, right? pipe down. But yeah, I think there's lots that hopefully that your audience will be able to take away from this this episode. And yeah, I'm happy to help if I can in the future.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Guys, don't over focus on the negatives, focus on your strengths and give yourself credit for your accomplishments. You've done well. Go you.
Yeah.
Ramat, how can our audience get into contact with you? Share your details, please.
So you can find me on Instagram, you can find me at Ramat_Tejani. So that's RAMAT_TEJANI. Or I share lots of tips around kind of being your truest self and being your best self. Well, being your truest self on the Inspiration Box Instagram as well. So that's at the Inspiration Box. And yeah, you can also find us at the website, theinspirationbox.com or ramattejani.com. And looking forward to hopefully speaking to some of you soon. And, as Lucinda said, just keep going. You're going to be absolutely fine.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ramat, again for joining us on the ProdBox.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and please share with others who may find it interesting or useful. And don't forget, you can subscribe to our mailing list at theprodbox.co.uk and join the conversation on Instagram or Twitter at TheProdBox. See you on the other side.